So in choosing a school, when it comes time to choose a school, there are lots of different things you're likely to consider depending on your family circumstances and the options available. Things you may think about if you have other children, where do they go to school? Makes a lot of sense to have all your kids enrolled at the one school, as it means one lot of canteen, P&C, trivia nights, notes home, etc. It also adds weight to your child's enrolment that you want all your children educated together as a family. If you don't have other children, then there may be different things to consider. If you want your child to become known locally, to have the opportunity to make friends, to be seen as part of your street and suburb and community, then you may want to ask yourself, where are the other preschool kids going? Where are the other kids from the street or local area going? Are there some good state, Catholic or independent schools nearby? Do you want to send your child to a school further from home, to what's called an out-of-area placement? As the majority of children attend a state school, we will be providing more information about this than the Catholic or independent school systems, although much of the information actually applies in all these contexts. The New South Wales Department of Education and Communities provides information about and guidance about enrolling at a public school on its website, and the department website also talks about the policy for out-of-area enrolments. So whichever school system you choose, there is a good process we recommend. Identifying your local schools, thinking about the potential out-of-area one as well, doing research, applying to enrol and getting to know your new school. So what do you think your research could involve? When doing this, other families commonly check the school website, talk to other families, go to open days, get copies of annual reports, meet and interview the principal to see if the school meets their needs. Gina, perhaps you could let us know what things you considered when choosing a school for Mac.
Sure. So as well as all those things, well, we did all of those things. One of the big things we looked at was whether our local school had the right feel. We did like it because it was a reasonable size, didn't have any support classes, and was less than 5 kilometres from home. And when we realised that it was a good school, or it was an appropriate school, we were really thrilled, because we knew that for Mac to go to his zoned school, his local area school, that was where he had the most rights and the most power, because that's where he was meant to be. Our school had a really nice set of core values, and that was used to kind of guide us towards it. And in our initial interviews and things like that, we were able to see that they took that seriously. And then the big thing was, because of those core values, we could then test, as time went on, things that were happening in the school or for Mac against the school's core values, just as we do with our own personal vision. And that also helps us to know if they're off track as well. And so all of that, looking at the big picture of the school, but also looking at their core values, and they should really match up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jenny. Your main message got across in terms of the nature of the school, the gut fit, the feel that you felt that it was going to be a great place for Mac.
Yep.
And the fact that you continue to go back to your vision and seeing if it actually relates and agrees with the line of your vision for Mac.
Yep.
So thanks for that. One thing to look for as well is statements or a motto that suggests the school that you're thinking of has an inclusive culture. And as an example of this, a few years ago, this sign that we're showing you now, this motto was on a school sign of a school up in the Hunter area. And I think you'll see that statement is very clear that it welcomes all learners, and that the school want to embrace individual difference and provide challenging ways for their students to have proper learning opportunities. And if you find these wonderfully supportive statements such as this when you're researching your schools of choice, it gives you a good position to praise a school as a beacon in education and possibly a good environment for your child. And that goes well in terms of your enrolment with the school. Doing research may sound that it's time consuming, but as with anything, doing research and knowing what you're wanting can be very helpful. We mentioned lots of families say when they seek enrolment that they have their views about enrolment potentially questioned, or where they get anxious about the supports that might be available. So again, it's really good to have a firm view of what you want at this stage. Gina, again, any enrolment experiences that you would like to share with us tonight?
this is some secret parents business, really. I initially met with the principal just to let them know that Mac would be starting in 2009. And I'd asked around a bit to find more about the principal, and I learned she was considered a little bit of a hippie. So for my first appointment, I made sure I wore my moonstone necklace and my poncho, and it certainly didn't hurt proceedings. Then our letter, which I think the ladies have got to pull up, was a much more in-depth insight into MAC, and it was something we gave them more in that formal enrolment funding discussion meeting, to give them a much better idea of MAC's learning needs without scaring them too much. I remember there was some suggestion in those early meetings that Mac might start part-time and build up to full-time. And we kind of just agreed, but really just fluffed over it. The reality was we had no intention of him starting part-time, but it also wasn't something that needed to be a point of contention at that stage. It wasn't ever discussed after that. We sort of figured it was an anxiety settler for the teachers, and so we just kind of glossed over it and never brought it up again. We tried to keep things fairly vague without setting anyone up for failure, because we didn't want things to become too prescriptive. And for example, when we talked to them about tube feeding, we let them know which of the kids in our social group and Mac's friends from preschool already knew how to tube feed Mac. And there's certainly something to be said for letting adults know that 5-year-olds know how to do something that they might otherwise think is a really complex procedure. So a lot of it was just that demystifying and trying to remove that fear, and help them along. Thanks, Karen.
Gina mentioned a letter that she had added as part of her enrolment. That's a 5-page letter, Gina, so we can put it up on our PowerPoint. However,
if you send the link.
However, it is an excellent letter, and I know it's available on your blog, and we will be certainly indicating your blog to people in our follow-up email, but we will also attach the letter so that they do see what you had put into that, which was an excellent way of presenting Mac in a really positive light and finalising his enrolment into his state school, local school, which is brilliant. So the other point Gina made then to those comments that she received from people saying, oh, it couldn't possibly happen, is to let that ride and not to try and respond to, I guess, to everything that they're being told or that they're hearing, so that things have a chance to just play out in reality on the day, as opposed to having everything dotted and crossed. The more we try and make the rules up as we go, the more rules get put in place for our sons and daughters to have to deal with in their school experience. Wouldn't you say, Gina?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so although the web suggests starting the process, the website, the DEC website, actually suggests starting the process via the region, via your regional team, that is not required that you start at the regional office if you are just seeking mainstream enrolment at your local school. It's also important to note that you can still do all the things that other families do when enrolling their child, researching, meeting with the school principal and so on. You do not have to be missing in action when you're putting through an enrolment or looking at a school. So however you start the process, though, it's best to leave plenty of time. There's likely to be a need for building work or particular equipment. 2 years ahead of time is actually not too early. And if you start earlier, school is less able to say that the timing will be an issue for their enrolment. So you're looking at your enrolment, now you're going to be meeting the principal. When making contact with a school for the first time, it is good to be prepared, and particularly, as we've suggested, to already have a firm view of what you want and why. In meeting a principal of a school for the first time, you may be keen to be assured that the school will provide great support for your child. You may be anxious for the school to fully understand all the ways your child needs support. We suggest that the first time you meet, resist the temptation to launch into an extensive list of your child's history, of their challenges and of their support needs. As an example, I'm sure we're all aware that when we're attending job interviews, it's unwise to emphasise that you can't use a particular software program, that your attention sometimes drifts away at about 3 p.m, and that you like to take a sickie when the cricket's on. Instead, you talk about your strengths. The same applies at an initial meeting with the school for your children. Talk about them as a child, your child, with a strengths and part of a family, the things that they like, why you would like them to go to this school, the good things you've heard about this school. There's plenty of time to discuss your child's support needs with the school at later meetings once you've selected a school. If it comes up, it's fine. You can respond to it, but you just don't want it to be your focus of that meeting. Think of this initial meeting as a time for gathering information to help you make a decision, and as an opportunity to introduce yourself and your child as a chance to flag the possibility of involvement. The initial meeting is not an enrolment meeting. It's an interview and an opportunity for you to see if the school meets your needs. Some families have also used a booklet or portfolio as a way of introducing their child in a positive way. The booklet could include your vision and have photographs of your son or daughter in various positive contexts. It could also talk about things he or she likes doing. It can be preferable to take the book to a first meeting with a school rather than taking maybe a noisy or squirming child. The silent book can sometimes make a better impression than a bored 4 or 5-year-old. It can be a way of introducing your child as a complex person and a member of a family rather than as a disability label. We'll send you a link to an article about preparing a booklet or a portfolio like that after the webinar. And if you're interested in following up the idea, feel free to call us to discuss it further. So the application to enrol. So once you've decided on the school, the next thing to be thoughtful about is actually applying to enrol. So state schools have a standard enrolment form. For Catholic and independent schools, the process does vary to some degree from school to school and region to region, but will be similar. And we'll provide a link in the email to further information on enrolment. This application then, it's important to note, will become part of your child's file and may be one of the first things the school staff sees describing your child. The application is intended to be used by schools in thinking about what support could be useful, but the way you describe your child may impact on those perceptions and expectations of the staff. So, for example, one of the questions is about violent behaviour. If your child has a disability label that's often associated with challenging behaviour, but you don't believe that violent behaviour is really the way to describe your child, it may be preferable to provide the information about your child's disability in the section that's about special needs and learning, as opposed to ticking it as a violent behaviour if it's not the correct normal or common way of your child's behaviour being. So being thoughtful of any form filling is important, and enrolment is just another one. So transition. So once your child's enrolment is accepted, this is when transition will begin. What this involves is likely to vary from school to school, but will probably involve visits to the school, meeting the person who may be their teacher, and so on. Some families have found taking photographs of the school and the classroom is a really helpful way of their child becoming comfortable with the transition to school. There should be meetings between you, school staff, and other relevant professionals who have knowledge of your child, such as people that may be in their preschool settings. This may be described as an early learning support team or something similar. This team should come together to formulate a transition to school plan. The plan identifies key issues to be addressed in the year prior to school entry. And before, in the month starting school, it could be helpful to find out some of the skills that will be useful for your child, like working or being with others and developing these skills as far as you can. For instance, the long summer holiday prior to school starting is a good way of having those photos and reminding your child of the school that's coming, the teacher that they may be having. Maybe setting a bit of a routine up. So if you know that crunch and sip is at a certain time in the morning, or little lunch, or whatever it might be called at the school of choice, then having those same routines in place during that summer holiday is a really helpful way of helping your child be able to cope with that more easily when the transition